Do you believe in the living dead? I didn't. Not really. I believed in grief, in denial, in seeing your loved one's face in a crowd because your brain can't accept they're gone. I stopped believing that the moment I saw my husband, the man I buried in a closed coffin after a fire, strolling down a fancy sidewalk in a pressed blue shirt, laughing with a girl young enough to be our daughter. The night before his death, we had a fight so bad I thought my heart would give out. The last words I ever said to him were, "Then go. If you're so miserable, just go." 24 hours later, he was gone. Fire, closed coffin, death certificate. I spent a year crying myself to sleep, breaking out in hives at the smell of smoke, gulping down antidepressants and beta blockers, trying to believe fate had just been cruel. And then 2 years later, there he was, in designer sunglasses, alive, tanned, smirking, with a girl who looked about the age I was when I first met him. You know what the funny thing is? I'm almost grateful. Because watching him walk around with his new life after I buried an empty coffin and a lie gave me something I hadn't had in a very long time. A purpose. Revenge. My name's Linda. I'm 60. I live in the suburbs outside Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, in one of those HOA communities with identical brick houses and board members who act like they're running a small dictatorship. I raised 2 kids, Emily and Jake. Mostly while my husband, Mark, worked late. I put worked late in quotes because that phrase has a smell to it and every woman over 40 knows it. It smells like cologne that isn't yours, faint perfume that isn't yours, and a credit card statement with charges he can't quite explain. We'd been married 35 years when he died. Mark was a financial planner, not one of the big Wall Street guys, but successful enough. He worked with wealthy clients, talked about asset management and diversification, always with that smug little half smile only men who think they're the smartest person in every room have. We weren't poor. The house was paid down, we had retirement accounts, a lake timeshare I never wanted, and matching SUVs because image was everything to Mark. But somewhere after the kids moved out and menopause hit me like a freight train, our marriage quietly fell apart. He became secretive with his phone, passwords on everything, sudden business trips, client dinners on Friday nights. The intimacy went cold first, like someone unplugged us, and then the rest of it followed. I did what women my age do. I blamed myself. Maybe I'd let myself go. Maybe I'd nagged too much. Maybe I was just old, and old women are wallpaper. The fight the night before he died wasn't about another woman, at least not on the surface. It was about money. I'd noticed a few months before that our accounts looked thinner than they should have been. Random transfers, a savings account that used to have a healthy cushion was suddenly nearly empty. When I asked, he brushed me off. "Market fluctuations, Lynn. Relax." I might be 60, but I'm not stupid. I was a bookkeeper for a local dentist's office for 20 years. I know what numbers are supposed to look like. The night before the fire, sitting at that same kitchen table where we'd carved pumpkins and paid tuition bills, I confronted him with a printed spreadsheet of our accounts. "Market fluctuations don't explain $28,000 disappearing in 3 months. Where is it going, Mark?" He didn't even look up from his phone at first. Then, slowly, he set it down, folded his hands, and gave me that patient look he used on clients. The one that said, "You're overreacting." "I told you there have been some dips." I slid the paper closer. "Dips don't have names attached to them like Riviera Capital Holdings when we've never invested in anything by that name. And what is MG Advisors LLC? That's not one of your usual accounts. What are you doing?" His jaw tightened. "You wouldn't understand," he said quietly. Every married woman knows that tone. It sounds like condescension dipped in gasoline. "What I understand is that I have given you my entire life, my youth, my body, my time, and I'm not going to sit quietly while you gamble away our future." He stood up so fast his chair scraped the tile. "I am not gambling away anything. I am building something. For us. But you never see the big picture, do you? You just cling." That word felt like a slap. "Cling," I repeated. "Right. I cling after running a household while you networked, after raising 2 kids practically alone, after covering for you, after ignoring suspicious perfume on your shirts. I cling? We yelled. It got ugly. Years of resentments boiled over. I told him if he was so miserable, he should leave. He told me I'd be nothing without him, that I'd shrivel up into some bitter old widow. Funny choice of words in hindsight. The last thing I said was, "Then go. If you're so miserable, just go." He grabbed his keys, slammed the door, and left. The next morning, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a sheriff's deputy. There'd been a fire at a storage warehouse on the edge of town. A freak electrical thing, they said at first. Mark's car was there. They found remains. It took a day before they told me they were confident it was him. Another week before the closed casket funeral. They recommended cremation because of the condition of the body. I didn't ask too many questions. My brain couldn't wrap itself around it. All I could think was, I told him to go. I told him to go, and then he died. For months afterward, I woke up gasping from nightmares of flames, of hearing him pound on a locked door, screaming my name. The grief counselor told me survivor's guilt was normal. What wasn't normal, apparently, was how my heart kept skipping beats. I wound up in a cardiologist's office on a heart monitor, being told stress and grief were literally inflaming my heart. A year of therapy, a medicine cabinet full of little orange bottles, 2 adult kids trying their best, Emily driving down every other weekend, bringing me casseroles I barely touched, Jake calling from Denver twice a week just to hear me breathe. Mark's office handled the life insurance, the estate. Everything felt weirdly efficient. I signed a stack of papers, probate documents, death certificates, beneficiary forms. I remember staring at the line, cause of death, accidental death caused by smoke inhalation and thermal injuries. It felt unreal and final. I was a widow. That's who I was. Until, apparently, I wasn't. 2 years later, almost to the month, my cardiologist finally eased up on the doom talk. My blood pressure was under control. I wasn't crying at every commercial with a sad dog in it. I could go a full afternoon without thinking about fire. I still wasn't happy, but I was functional. That's a start at 60. That day, I'd gone into Fort Worth proper to meet a friend for lunch and then stop by a consignment shop to drop off some of Mark's old clothes. I'd kept his closet closed for 2 years, like one of those rooms in old Victorian houses they never open because the ghost might come out. Cleaning it out felt like progress. I carried the garment bag down West 7th, one of those trendy streets with wine bars and overpriced restaurants. There was a sidewalk cafe with people laughing, the clink of glasses, that hum of life you don't realize you've been missing until it annoys you. And then my heart just flatlined. My body stopped before my brain did, because there, sitting at one of those little patio tables under a maroon umbrella, was Mark. Same profile, same hairline, the scar above his left eyebrow from when he fell off his bike at 12. It was him. He was wearing a navy button-down shirt I'd given him for his 55th birthday. He was leaning back, laughing, one arm around the back of the chair of a young woman in a low-cut sundress, her long hair swinging over her tanned shoulders. I actually felt my knees buckle. The garment bag slipped out of my hand. He was supposed to be in a closed coffin 6 feet under, in a cemetery 10 miles away. Instead, he was sipping wine like a middle-aged bachelor contestant. I did what any reasonable 60-year-old woman with a mildly damaged heart and too many emotions would do. I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't storm the patio. I didn't throw his wine in his face and yell, "How are you not dead?" No. I stood there on the sidewalk, my body shaking, my hands going numb, feeling like I'd stepped out of my life and into a very bad Lifetime movie.
The girl said something. He leaned in toward her and laughed, that same awful, smug laugh that used to make me want to grind my teeth. He took off his sunglasses, and I saw his eyes. That was the moment I knew. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't grief seeing what it wants. It was him. I fumbled for my phone like I was suddenly 95, fingers clumsy, heartbeat in my throat. I opened the camera and snapped a photo. It came out shaky, a little blurry, but his face was visible. At that exact second, he turned. Our eyes met. It felt like being hit by a truck. His smile dropped. His face went dead pale. For a second, and this is the part I still replay for fun, I watched absolute, pure terror flash across his features. Then he grabbed the girl's hand, said something, slapped some bills on the table, and practically dragged her inside. "Mark!" I croaked. It came out more like a wheeze. He didn't look back. By the time I stumbled to the entrance, they were gone. There was a back exit out to the parking lot, I later learned. I stood there on the sidewalk, holding my phone, staring at the door, feeling the world tilt. A car honked. Someone brushed past me. I must have looked insane. I don't remember the drive home. My friend called me later, annoyed I'd missed lunch. I sat at my kitchen table for hours, staring at that blurry photo of my dead husband alive and looking very comfortable with his new life. By the time Emily showed up that weekend, I had convinced myself maybe I'd hallucinated. Maybe it was some cruel doppelganger. But then I showed her the photo. She stared at it, her face drained. "That looks like Dad," she whispered. "But Mom, you know it can't." I laughed. It sounded a little hysterical. "Your father apparently skipped the 'till death do us part' section and just went straight to do-it-yourself resurrection." Emily tried to be practical. "It could be some random guy. You've been under a lot of stress. Maybe your brain just latched on to—" "Random guys don't wear shirts. I bought them," I snapped. Then I softened. "I know how it sounds, Em. I do. But that's him." She didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. Just patted my hand like I was fragile. My therapist called it complicated grief, suggested maybe seeing someone you believe is your deceased loved one is a way your mind processes unresolved guilt. I didn't bother showing her the picture. I just nodded, took my prescription, and smiled. But that night when the house was quiet, I zoomed in on that photo until the pixels blurred and I thought, if you're alive, Mark, I will bury you properly this time. In court. A week later, I went back to that same street. Some part of me expected lightning to strike or a shadow to dart away. All I got was parking trouble and a too-sweet latte. I sat on a bench across from the wine bar like some low-budget private eye. I felt ridiculous. 60 years old in my sensible sandals and Chico's blouse, stalking a restaurant. Nothing happened that first day. Or the second. On the third day, around 6 p.m., when I was about ready to accept I'd had a mental break and start researching assisted living facilities for myself, a black Tesla pulled up in front of the wine bar. He stepped out, no sunglasses this time, same face, same lazy walk. The girl slid out the passenger side, short white dress, big designer bag. He put his hand on her lower back as they walked in. I didn't freeze this time. I took 3 clear photos. I made sure I got his face, hers, and the Tesla with its license plate. I waited until they were seated, then slipped down the block, heart pounding but oddly steady, focused. I found the Tesla in the parking lot, pretended to be fumbling with my keys, and took a photo of the plate. Texas plate. I memorized it anyway. When they left, I was already in my car 2 rows over, engine idling. They pulled out. I followed. It felt like the world's slowest, quietest car chase. We drove out of downtown, onto the highway, then into one of those extremely wealthy, gated communities where the guardhouse looks nicer than most people's homes. He rolled down his window and beeped something at the guard. The gate lifted. I kept going past like I'd taken a wrong turn, heart hammering. but I'd seen the name on the stone sign. Bent Oaks Estates. I pulled into a gas station down the road, legs shaking so hard I had to sit there for a minute. He was alive, living in a multi-million-dollar neighborhood I know we never could have afforded, with a car we never had, with a girl who looked like she lived at the gym. Meanwhile, I'd clipped coupons and wondered if I could afford a new water heater. By the time I drove home, numb but oddly clear-headed, the grief had curdled into something sharper, cleaner.
Rage. The next day, I called my neighbor, Carol, queen of the HOA and also a walking Rolodex. "Hey," I said casually, "you still have that cousin in law enforcement?" "Which one?" she asked. "The one in Vice or the one in DMV?" "Only in Texas, I swear." "The DMV one." She gave me his email and told me to tell him he still owed her for Thanksgiving 2019. I sent him a nice little note asking if he could run a plate for me. Said I was concerned about a car that'd been hanging around the neighborhood too long. I expected to wait days. He responded within an hour. Plate, redacted, vehicle 2023 Tesla Model S, registered to David M. Grayson, address Bent Oaks Estates, Lot 14. David M. Grayson. I stared at that name and my stomach did a slow, ugly twist. Mark's middle initial was M. Our last name was Grayson. He'd changed a single letter. Not only was he alive, he was living under a discount fake name. I almost admired the laziness. Almost. That night, after I triple-locked my doors, I dug out the old file box I'd nearly tossed after probate. It had all the documents from the months after his death: life insurance paperwork, death certificate, coroner's report, police report, fire marshal's findings. I'd never really read them, just signed where the lawyer put little sticky flags. Now I read every word, pen in hand, glasses on the tip of my nose like some cranky librarian. The more I read, the less crazy I felt. The initial investigation said the fire started in an electrical panel in a storage unit Mark rented. The unit contained paper records and personal effects. By the time firefighters arrived, the blaze had spread. Several units damaged, one body found near the origin point of the fire. Cause of death: smoke inhalation and heat injuries. Identification: wallet with his driver's license nearby, make and model of car in the parking lot, and dental records provided by his dentist. No DNA test was mentioned. No autopsy details, just remains not suitable for further examination. I flipped to our dentist's name. Our dentist was in the same church group as Mark. Interesting. Then I pulled older files. Tax returns, brokerage statements, bank records. I spread them across my dining table in piles. For 2 hours, I traced balances, transfers, notes. 2 months before his death, things got active. An old IRA account he rarely touched suddenly had buy-sell activity. There were transfers from our joint savings to something called Riviera Capital Holdings. Funds moved from his business account to MG Advisors, LLC. And then, right before the fire, a big transaction. A wire transfer out of an investment account I didn't even know he had. Amount: $20 million. I said the number out loud just to hear it. $20 million. Apparently, my husband had been playing in leagues I never knew existed. He'd taken that money right out of a hidden account and then, poof, fire, widow, closed coffin. I sat back feeling cold all over. He hadn't just left me. He'd buried me alive in a life that was a lie and walked away with $20 million. If my heart hadn't already been checked, I'd have called 911 right then. Instead, I picked up my phone and did something I never thought I'd do in my life. I Googled how to prove someone faked their death. I made 3 calls the next day. My daughter, a private investigator, and a lawyer. Emily was first. I sent her the clearer photos from my second stakeout. Him, the girl, the Tesla, the Bent Oaks gate in the background. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. She was whispering like she was in a church. "Mom, That's Dad. I know. Silence. Just breathing. Are you sure it's not, twins? A cousin? He doesn't have a twin. And if he had a cousin walking around with his face, I'd have noticed in 35 years. She exhaled. What are you going to do? First, I'm going to stop taking antidepressants. It turns out I'm not crazy. After that, I'm going to take everything he thought he got away with. Do you need help? I closed my eyes, suddenly so grateful for this kid I'd raised into a woman. Yeah, I admitted. I probably do. The private investigator was recommended by my neighbor Carol's other cousin. If you're noticing a theme, yes, in Texas, everyone is connected to a cousin in some gray area profession. His name was Roy, 50-something, ex-cop, blunt.
We met in a Starbucks because apparently that's where you plan your exhumation of a living man these days. I slid the photos and documents across the table to him. Told him everything. The fire, the closed coffin, the Bent Oaks sighting, the new name, the $20 million. He didn't interrupt, just listened, flipping slowly. When I finished, he took a long sip of his coffee and said, "Well, ma'am, I've heard some," he caught himself, glanced at my age, "stuff in my time, but this is up there." "Can you help?" I asked. "I can confirm whether this guy in Bent Oaks is your husband," he said. "I can dig on David M. Grayson, see what pops. But if he did fake his death, we're talking major insurance fraud, arson, maybe more. That's law enforcement territory after a point." "Good," I said. "I want him in every kind of territory that makes his life miserable." He grinned a little. "Remind me never to cross you, Miss Grayson." "Mrs. Grayson," I said, apparently still. My lawyer was next. A woman named Dana that Emily found through a coworker, specializes in family law and complex estates. She looked like she'd 2 nails for breakfast. Dana paged through the same stack of documents, the photos, the printout of the registration for David M. Grayson. At one point, she raised an eyebrow. "He changed one letter?" "Lazy," I said. She almost smiled. "Okay, here's the situation. Legally, your husband is dead. There's a death certificate. Probate was processed. You inherited his estate, which, from what you've told me, was, shall we say, modest compared to this $20 million that walked off. You can say pathetic. Modest," she repeated calmly. "If he's alive, that death certificate is fraudulent. That drags in the coroner, possibly the dentist, definitely your husband. It becomes a criminal matter. Fake death, potential insurance fraud, maybe even securities fraud, depending on how he moved the money." "Fine by me." She nodded slowly. "Here's the problem. Walking into a courtroom and saying, 'I saw my dead husband at a wine bar,' isn't going to get us very far without proof. You'll look crazy," I finished for her. "I'm used to that look. What we can do," Dana said, "is file a petition in family court to reopen your marital status based on newly discovered evidence that your spouse may still be alive, which will force the court, at minimum, to request an investigation. The worst that happens is they deny it and you're back where you started. The best that happens, we blow this wide open. And then I can divorce him." She smiled fully this time. "And then you can divorce him. But if he committed fraud on this scale, we're not just talking about divorce assets. We're talking damages, compensation, maybe a whole lot more." "How much more?" I asked. She shrugged. "Depends what we find. But if he walked off with $20 million that was earned during your marriage, half that is community property. Add penalties and so on, we could be looking at a lot." Something in my chest, something tight and hard that had been there since the night before the fire, loosened. "Do it," I said. "File whatever you have to file." A week later, I stood at a polished wood counter at the county courthouse, clutching paperwork. "I'd like to file for divorce," I told the clerk. She typed my name into her computer, frowned. "Ma'am, there's a note here says your husband is deceased." "Yes," I said. "I'm aware. I'm divorcing him anyway." She looked up, clearly trying to decide if I was joking. "You can't divorce a dead man." I'm not divorcing a dead man. I'm divorcing a very alive man who has been dead on paper for 2 years, and I'd appreciate it if you just stamp the form so we can move this along. She blinked. I think you need to talk to a judge. That's the plan, I said. Dana had already filed the motion, but I wanted to be there, to see it entered. 2 weeks later, we were in a small courtroom. Just me, Dana, a bored-looking clerk, and a family court judge who looked like he'd rather be golfing. "Miss Grayson," the judge said, peering down at us, "I reviewed your petition. You understand that your husband was declared deceased. There's a signed death certificate, a completed probate case." "Yes, Your Honor," I said.
And the man eating truffle fries at a wine bar last week with a 20-something brunette understood that too when he picked out a new name with one extra letter. The judge's eyebrows rose halfway to his hairline. "You're claiming your husband is alive?" "I'm not claiming, I'm stating. I have photos. I have vehicle registration. I have transfer records for $20 million just before his so-called death. At the very least, don't you think that deserves a closer look?" Dana laid out our binder. Photos, documents, the plate printout, a timeline. He flipped through, expression shifting from annoyance to interest. He leaned back, steepled his fingers. "Well," he murmured, "this is unusual." "That's one word for it," I said. He glanced at me, the faintest twitch of amusement in his eyes. "All right, Miss Grayson, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to forward this case to the district attorney's office with a recommendation that they open a preliminary investigation into possible fraud. I cannot, at this time, revise your marital status without official confirmation that your husband is in fact alive, but I'm not dismissing your claim." "Thank you, Your Honor," Dana said smoothly. He turned to me. "If what you're alleging is true, you've been grievously wronged." I felt my throat tighten. "Yes, Your Honor, I have." "Then let's see what the facts say." As we left, Dana leaned over. "That," she whispered, "is the legal equivalent of him saying, 'Let's go get this jerk.'" We walked down those courthouse steps into hot Texas sunshine, and for the first time since I'd stared at a closed coffin, I felt awake. He'd faked his death. Now we were going to resurrect him properly, in court. Once the DA's office got the file, things moved faster than I expected. Apparently, when someone waves around phrases like fake death, $20 million, and possible insurance fraud, enough people's ears perk up. Roy the PI earned every penny I paid him. He staked out Ben Oaks, got better photos of David, going in and out of his fancy house, walking the dog, getting package deliveries, kissing the brunette in the driveway. Always the same walk, same laugh. He even got a video of him arguing with a landscaper, which made me snort. Some things never change. But the golden ticket came from digging into David M. Grayson's paperwork. Driver's license, social security number, credit files. They belonged originally to a man who died 10 years earlier in another state. Some poor guy with almost the same name who'd passed away quietly in a hospital bed. Identity theft layered on top of death fraud. Nice. Meanwhile, over at the DA's office, an investigator named Morales called me in. She laid out enlarged copies of the original fire report, then a supplemental one. "You were never told this," Morales said, "but at the time of the fire, there were a few things that didn't add up." I stared at her. Then why was I handed a death certificate like it was no big deal? Because nothing was definitive enough to disprove it. And frankly, no one was looking too hard. It was called an accident. There was a body. The wallet matched, the car matched. The coroner signed off, the family, you, accepted it. Cases like this don't usually get revisited. Until the living dead start having wine in public, I said. Morales didn't quite smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched. She pointed at the photos. The fire started in this unit. The origin point was an electrical outlet, but there were traces of accelerant nearby. At the time, they chalked it up to spilled cleaning supplies because one of the neighboring units belonged to a janitorial company. So it could have been deliberate? Yes. As for the remains, her face hardened. It was a partial body, severe burns. The coroner relied heavily on dental records and the presence of your husband's wallet. "The dentist was his friend," I said. She nodded. "We're aware. We've interviewed him. He's lawyering up." I sat back, suddenly cold. So there's a chance that body wasn't even
I can't discuss specifics yet, Morales cut in, gentle but firm. But we're treating this as a potential staged scene. Your husband rented that unit himself. He was seen entering the facility on security cameras an hour before the fire, but there's no clear footage of him leaving. The cameras in the rear lot were malfunctioning that night. She made air quotes. I liked her. So what now? I asked. Now, she said, we quietly build the case. We subpoena records Mr. Grayson thought he buried. We trace that 20 million and we make very sure before we yank him out of his fancy house that we can keep him in a much less fancy one for a very long time. I nodded. Something dark and satisfied curled in my chest. Can I do anything? I asked. She studied me for a second. Honestly, Miss Grayson, you've already done more than most people would. You saw something. You didn't let people gaslight you into thinking you were crazy. You pushed. That's the ballgame. Now you live your life. Let us do the chasing. I nodded, but inside, I was already planning my next move. I wasn't just going to let them catch him. I was going to make sure when he finally saw me again that I'd be sitting at the table where his life toppled like a bad Jenga tower. The DA's office moved in silence for 3 months. During that time, I did something radical. I started taking care of myself. I went off antidepressants with my doctor's supervision. My heart medication was adjusted. I joined a walking group of women in my neighborhood and discovered that gossip, sunshine, and endorphins are a decent substitute for pharmaceuticals. But every night, before bed, I'd look at those photos of Mark as David. Sometimes I'd flip off the screen like a teenager. Sometimes I'd just stare and think, you have no idea what's coming. Then, one morning, I got the call. Miss Grayson, this is Morales. We're ready to bring him in. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table. Bring him in how? With handcuffs, she said simply. We have enough. Identity theft, fraud, staging the fire. We're coordinating with federal partners on the financial side. That 20 million touched accounts that make certain agencies very interested. We'll be making the arrest at his residence. We wanted to offer you the option to be present at the arraignment. I swallowed. My throat felt tight. Yes, I want to be there. She hesitated. It may not be pleasant. I laughed, a little too sharply. The day my husband burned to death, allegedly, was not pleasant. His funeral was not pleasant. The year I thought I'd killed him with an argument was not pleasant. Watching him be treated like a criminal he is, that I think I can handle. Silence. Then, all right, we'll notify you of the date and time. The arrest itself, I only heard about after the fact. Roy, the PI, called me, voice almost gleeful. He took him right off his front porch. He came out for a package in his little golf shirt, and wham, 3 SUVs, badges, the works. New wifey was screaming on the lawn. New wifey? I repeated. Oh yeah, Roy said. They're married, legally, under the fake name. Married at a courthouse 3 months after his death. My head buzzed. So, he's a bigamist, too? Seems like it. Poor girl looked like she just found out Santa was a scam and the Easter Bunny was trafficking drugs. I almost feel bad for her. Almost, he agreed. The arraignment was held in a larger courtroom than the first one. Cameras were barred, but there were reporters outside. Word had gotten out, and that way it does. Whisper to whisper, then headline. Fort Worth man accused of faking death and stealing millions. I walked past them in a sensible skirt and blazer, my hair done for the first time in months, chin up. I'd spent 35 years invisible next to my husband's larger-than-life persona. Not today. Inside, the air conditioning was so cold it made my joints ache. I sat in the second row, Dana beside me, Emily on my other side squeezing my hand so hard I thought my fingers might break. When they brought him in, shackled, wearing an orange jumpsuit, I felt nothing for a second. Then everything. He looked older. The tan was gone.
His hairline had receded a little more, but it was him. He scanned the room, his eyes slid over me, then stopped. I watched the color drain from his face. For the second time, I got to see that flash of pure terror, worth every penny of therapy. State of Texas versus Mark Allen Grayson, a.k.a. David Michael Grayson, the clerk intoned. The DA read out the charges: fraud, arson, obstruction, identity theft, insurance fraud, etc., stacking up like Lego blocks, one after another. At one point, the judge asked, "Do you understand the charges against you?" Mark's eyes flicked to me again, wild. He said, "This is all a misunderstanding." I almost laughed out loud. The judge set bail so high, his jaw clenched.
Dana leaned over and whispered, "He's not getting out unless someone's very stupid or very rich on his behalf." The young wife wasn't there. I'd seen photos of her in the paper by then. Her name was Kylie, 28, yoga instructor. Social media page full of inspirational quotes about manifesting abundance. I wondered how her manifestation was going now that her husband's abundance was under federal review. After the hearing, in a small conference room, the prosecutors laid it out. They had proof he'd set up shell companies, Riviera Capital, MG Advisors, funneling client money in ways that skimmed profits for himself. He'd gotten lucky on some tech stocks right before the fire, turning a big haul into that $20 million transfer to an offshore account. Then he'd rented the storage unit, stocked it with Parsient records and some of his personal items. The night of the fire, he'd met a man behind on his luck, paid him in cash to help move some things. The rest, they were still piecing together, but it appeared another body had been used in the fire, someone Mark had reason to believe no one would come looking for. I felt sick at that part. Sick and furious that some other person's death had been used as a prop in his escape. He'd bribed the dentist to fudge dental records, used the malfunctioning cameras, timed the fire to happen late enough that no workers were around, walked away from the back entrance, got in an Uber, and vanished. Then, using the stolen identity, he resurfaced 6 months later as David Grayson, freshly relocated to a Texas address with a fat bank account and a story about being a widower from another state. By the time Kylie met him at some upscale gym, he was fully committed to his new role. The prosecutor looked at me seriously. "Mrs. Grayson, I won't lie. This is going to be a long process. He's got lawyers already. He may try to blame others, the dentist, the coroner, anyone. He may claim mental health issues. But given what we have, we're confident we can secure a conviction." "What about the money?" I asked quietly. "The $20 million? That," she said, "is where your civil lawyer comes in. Criminally, we can seek restitution. Civilly, you can file for divorce and for your share of marital assets, plus damages. Given the fraud, we'll be supporting any effort you make to claim those funds." Dana nodded beside me. "We'll be filing for divorce immediately now that his living status is confirmed." She said living status so dryly I almost smiled. "He's gonna fight it," I said. "Probably," the prosecutor agreed, "but he's fighting from a cell. You're fighting from your kitchen table. Advantage. You." For the first time in 2 years, the playing field had tilted in my favor. Now, it was time to collect. The divorce proceedings were, predictably, nasty. His criminal lawyer tried to delay anything on the civil side, arguing that ongoing proceedings might prejudice his right to a fair trial. Dana politely shredded that argument. He prejudiced his own rights, she said in one hearing, when he decided to fake his death and abandon his wife. Ultimately, we got what we wanted. A concurrent divorce case with the judge very aware that he was dealing with a man accused of monumental fraud and emotional cruelty. Kylie, bless her naive heart, hired her own lawyer and got her marriage annulled on the basis of fraud. She reached out to Emily on social media, a teary message about how she had no idea and felt so betrayed and used. Emily showed it to me. Do you want to respond?" I stared at Kylie's profile picture. Big eyes, pouty lips, a half shirt. She looked like someone who'd never had to read the fine print on anything. I said, "Tell her I believe she didn't know. And then tell her to get therapy and a good accountant, in that order." In the divorce filings, we laid out everything. The secret accounts, the transfers, the $20 million, how he'd misrepresented our finances, hidden assets, staged his death, left me with the scraps of a life he no longer wanted. Texas is a community property state. That means anything acquired during the marriage is presumed to belong to both spouses. We argued, successfully, that the $20 million was earned during the marriage with knowledge and opportunities built during that marriage, even if he hid the account. Add that to damages for emotional distress, the fraudulent probate, the legal fees I'd incurred to clean up the mess, and the fact that he'd left me thinking I'd somehow caused his death for 2 years. Dana went for the jugular.
"We're seeking $15 million, she told the court calmly, as her rightful share and compensation. His side sputtered, claimed he had far less liquidity now, that the offshore accounts were frozen, that penalties and taxes would eat a lot, that she was attempting to profit from his alleged wrongdoing. The judge cut them off. "Alleged wrongdoing?" he repeated. "Counselor, your client faked his death. Let's not sugarcoat it." I could have kissed that judge. It took another 6 months. Negotiations, hearings, more paperwork than I knew existed in the world. But slowly, piece by piece, it came together. Asset tracing showed that after taxes, penalties, and restitution he was going to owe to some of his defrauded clients and the government, there would be roughly $18 million left of the original 20. Of that, the settlement granted me $15 million. $15 million. The number looked fake on paper, like Monopoly money. The first time I saw the transfer hit the new account Dana set up for me, I laughed so hard I scared my cat. It didn't erase the years. The grief, the therapy, the heart monitor. It didn't bring back the version of my life I thought I had, but it did something else. It made me free. Free from worrying about my next medical bill, free from clipping coupons for the rest of my life, free from the ghost of a man who'd treated me like a piece of old furniture to be left behind while he upgraded. When sentencing day came for the criminal case, I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to his funeral. The irony was for me, not him. He'd taken a plea deal in the end. Once his lawyers saw the stack of evidence and the multiple jurisdictions interested, they decided rolling the dice at trial wasn't worth it. He pled guilty to several counts: fraud, arson, identity theft, false death report, and more. The judge gave him 25 years. With parole possibilities down the line, but even on the best timetable, he'd leave prison an old man. He was 58 when the sentence came down. Do the math. Before the judge pronounced sentence, he allowed victim impact statements. I didn't think I'd read mine without collapsing. But when I stood at that podium, paper in hand, I felt steadier than I had in a decade. I looked at Mark, sitting there in his jumpsuit, hands cuffed. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Your Honor," I began, "I'm not here today as a scorned wife or a woman who didn't know her husband. I'm here as someone who had to bury a closed coffin and live with the belief that my last words to my husband helped put him in the ground." My voice wavered, but I kept going. For 2 years, I woke up every night hearing fire in my dreams. I thought I had killed him with anger. I thought I was being punished for every moment I'd complained, every time I'd asked for help, every time I dared to want more out of life. I took pills to sleep and pills to wake. My heart literally could not bear the weight of grief and guilt. My children watched their mother fade, all while I didn't look at him, was out sipping wine and buying a Tesla. He didn't just steal money. He stole 2 years of my life. He stole my peace. He stole my identity. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a person. I was a prop for the story he wanted the world to believe. He staged his own death and left me to die in his place, slowly, one sleepless night at a time. I took a breath. The courtroom was silent.
I am not here asking for vengeance, I said. The legal system has done its work. I am here asking for recognition that what he did is not just numbers on a page or boxes checked on a charge sheet. It is cruelty. It is abandonment. It is cowardice at a level I still struggle to comprehend. So when you sentence him, Your Honor, I ask that you keep one thing in mind. He has already had more life than he thought I'd ever get. He had 2 extra years of freedom, of sunshine, of new love, of expensive toys while I was learning to breathe again. I can't get those years back, but you can make sure he pays for every day he stole. I finished. My hands were trembling, but my voice was calm. The judge nodded solemnly. Thank you, Mrs. Grayson. When the sentence came, I didn't smile, I didn't cry. I just watched as the guards led him away, chains clinking. He glanced back once. I met his eyes. And in that moment, I saw it. The realization that the woman he'd always underestimated was the one who finally ended his game.
That was my revenge. The money was just the interest. $15 million sounds like a golden ticket. Here's the reality of being 60 and suddenly wealthy. Your knees still hurt in the morning. Your cholesterol doesn't care about your bank balance. The people who loved you before are the ones who matter. And everyone else suddenly becomes very interested in your plans. I did a few simple things first. I paid off the house, even though I could have bought a bigger, fancier one. I like my little brick box and my nosy HOA and Carol's constant gossip. I set up trust funds for Emily and Jake and eventually my grandkids. I donated a chunk quietly to organizations that help people, like the man whose body was used in that fire, the invisible ones, the ones nobody claims. I hired a financial advisor who is legally obligated to explain every single move to me like I'm 5, because I am never again living in a fog when it comes to money. I took my walking group on a vacation to the beach, all expenses paid. Watching those women splash in the waves, shrieking like teenagers, may have been one of the best feelings of my life. People asked, of course, in the grocery store, at church, online, "Aren't you angry? Don't you wish you'd never met him? Don't you regret saying those last words?" I won't lie. There are nights I still wake up thinking I smell smoke. There are moments when I see a man in a navy shirt and my heart jumps in my throat before my brain corrects it. I still remember the last fight, how careless words can linger. But here's the thing I've learned at 60, after burying an empty coffin and resurrecting a man in a courtroom. Regret is useless if you let it weigh you down. It's only worth anything if you turn it into a lever. He thought he'd left me with nothing, emotionally, financially, socially. Instead, he left me with proof that I am a hell of a lot stronger than he ever gave me credit for. I'm not grateful to him as a person. He's a coward who will spend most of the rest of his life where he belongs. But I am grateful for what I clawed back out of the mess he left. A purpose, a voice, a future I chose. The last time I visited his grave, it was only because I happened to be driving by the cemetery and curiosity tugged. The headstone still had his name, his original one. People had left flowers, once. They were dead and brittle now. I stood there for a minute, hands in my pockets, wind tugging my hair. "You know," I said quietly, "I used to talk to you here, tell you how much I missed you, how sorry I was." I shook my head. I'm not sorry anymore. I looked down at the stone, at the dates, his fake end carved in granite, and I almost laughed. "The funny thing is," I said, "you did die, just not the way you planned. The man I married is gone. And what's left is a story I tell myself when I need to remember that I survived you." I turned and walked away. These days, when I pass a wine bar, I don't see ghosts. I see a woman who followed the route of a man who thought she'd never look up from her grief. I see myself, alive, very much alive. And when people ask me what I'm doing with the rest of my life, I smile and say, whatever I want. I'm done being the widow of the living dead. I'm the woman who buried him twice, once in a coffin and once in court. And I'm finally at peace.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye.